Certainly, it's not showing that it is.
Yeah, just didn't turn it on.
Saying like, I know we pressed it a lot, but I'm saying that's so long. Well, we have.
We
to
can't,
bring that
it's
to-
gotta be streamed.
The whole meeting has to be streamed in the public meeting.
So, okay,
But
it used to be on TV.
We'll go right back down.
Okay. No, Nikki, Miss Landry. So we think that the majority was probably not live streamed. Do we need to start over, or are we good to just continue where we were?
I am happy to repeat everything. But can we go on the slide where it shows the link? It will help folks that are right.
What do we need to do from?
When you go back on, just say we have some technical difficulties for those viewing at home. We're gonna go back and repeat.
So Jeff,
Y'all are on right now.
okay. So Jeff, Mr. Powell, why don't you go ahead
Let me
and,
just recap what we.
yes,
Okay.
please.
Okay, so due to the technical difficulties and for the sake of those who may be trying to follow us on the live stream, we did call this meeting to order a few moments ago. We approved the minutes from the previous meeting that are available for your viewing, I believe, through the link to this particular meeting. And we are in the process of the fourth item, which is consideration of an update regarding Montessori education issues, and we have invited members of the LDOE curriculum staff. Ms. Sharon Nikes is giving some update on how instructional materials are adopted, reviewed through the Louisiana Department of Education. So we do apologize for those on live stream that are trying to follow. So we're going to pick up there. We need to do it again. All four of them?
Just the one.
Okay, so
The motion for the report.
I need a motion to hear the report on updates regarding Montessori education issues. Again, Ms. Molly Williams makes the motion. Kay Saragusa seconds that motion. Any objections to hearing that? Any public comment on hearing it? Without further ado, we will turn it back over to Ms. Nikes from the department.
I'm here to share some information about our instructional materials review process and how our division supports school systems in making choices around curriculum materials. In Louisiana, we're a local choice state, which that means that all school systems are able to purchase instructional materials that they feel meets the needs of their students and benefits their communities. We support that process by reviewing curriculum in four areas. It's actually required by statute for us to do this. It's an information-only process. It doesn't come with a requirement. We lead an online review process for instructional materials in the four areas. That's math, K-12, ELA K-12, science, and social studies. We also lead a review process on reading intervention for grades 3-8 and early childhood. Like I said, it's an online review process required by statute. Part of that law also says these reviews have to be completed by Louisiana teachers. We fulfill that part of the law by having contracts with teacher leader advisors in the four areas in all different grade levels. I gave the example before because we wouldn't want, let's say, a kindergarten ELA teacher reviewing geometry materials. We want to make sure the teachers have robust experience with the standards. We train them on our review tools and the process and put them in teams that calibrate those reviews and processes. Part of the process, those reviews will come to our content team. They're checked for validity through our content team as well, and then go to the publisher. I was corrected from what I said before. We've increased the date that a publisher can go under construction from 90 to 120. We're so generous. That way, if a review comes back and there's a couple of things or something that the publisher can fix in that time period, we don't start the whole process over. We let them update the materials. If they satisfy the requirements of the review, we move them on. A part of that process also means the materials are posted for public review and public comment. The publisher's response, as well as the public comment, are included in the final review posting on our webpage. The reviews are tiered, and like I said before, the name's a little bit misleading because it's the same terminology we use for our TI model of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, but they're not related. Tier 1 materials from our review tool are deemed to align to the standards, the highest alignment in our review process possible. Tier 2 indicates a partial alignment, means they've got the major things, but they may be missing some of the more important things. But we want to give that information to schools and school systems and teachers because teachers would need to supplement. Tier 3 indicates those materials are not aligned to our standards in a significant way. And so we want to provide that information for school systems to make the best choice. Like I said, the curriculum review process is information only. It is not required. I know a lot of folks seem to think that it is. We do also at the same time have our school system planning with our super app, where our schools that are struggling most are labeled schools. They are required in part of their plan to get better for improvement to adopt tier 1 materials where they have it. I think that's where some of the confusion comes in, but by and large, local choice schools and school systems make their choice of materials. Unless you're a labeled school that's struggling academically, then part of your plan and the state ESSA plan is that you adopt tier 1 materials or high quality instructional materials through our super app. I just shared a lot of information about our review process and the way adoption occurs. Happy to answer any questions about the specifics of the process with super app and curriculum as well.
Anybody have any questions for Ms. Nikes? All right, thank you for providing that update. I do want to just maybe ask a clarifying question because I know some public school systems have utilized the Montessori programming as a kind of turnaround model. And in the past, it has been approved through various funding mechanisms, even though there's not a tier 1 curriculum associated with it. So we know that there has been a pathway for that in the past. I know that may not just be a curriculum question, but my assumption is that still is a possibility through the.
There is an option for a research-based option. In other words, I'm a labeled school, a CIR or UR school, right? And I have to select a tier 1 curriculum. But maybe on that list, I have a research-based option that I can write in that would come to my team for review. In my time in the department, which has been off and on for over 10 years, that has happened one time at the Montessori school. It got flagged as an exception. And it came to me for their super app approval, and obviously it's research-based, so it was approved. So it's not something that happens a lot. It's happened one time where it came to me.
And there are members of this task force that are part of the private, charter, public, traditional public here. And so those options are really available for charter and public for sure. And are there any mechanisms under the LDOE umbrella for private schools when it comes to curriculum and resources other than just the research side of it?
Yeah, that I don't know. That would go to like their folks that work with our non-public schools. I deal mostly with the public schools and public charter section first.
Okay. So because one of the goals that this task force talked about last time was related to funding. So I guess I'll ask Joelle or Molly or some of the others, your funding, I guess, 100% comes from the tuition and things that you ask parents to pay. And then you have to make sure that you're, in order to maintain the integrity of your programming, that you're purchasing only resources that align with the Montessori methodology.
We do get Title II, Title IV, EEF,
You do have access to those funds.
and $300 AG.
Yeah.
Okay. And required services first.
Okay.
I mean, we got our huge pots.
And you have access to that through coordination with your local school system, or it comes direct to you through your local school system? Okay. Okay. Very good. Thank you, Ms. Nikes.
Any other questions you have? We do have an inbox. It's up there, Louisiana curriculum review at LA.gov. I know you have your own curriculum materials. It probably doesn't exactly fit our, but if you feel you have something that aligns with our rubrics and you want us to review it, you can reach out to that inbox and we're happy to answer.
give us time for us to discuss this.
Sure.
Because yesterday in a conversation with Joelle, Kay and Angie already know, and some Kelly may too, there's a company, ETC Montessori. They're already a vendor. I mean, people would get refugees already buying things from ETC, but they've done a lot of curriculum on it, and they have, y'all want to talk about it? I think there's something that we could submit for this as a Montessori tier 1, so that you don't have to go back to having an exception interface, whatever.
Which is progress, because for many years, there wasn't anything that was sort of packaged that could be presented.
When I don't know until we go, we wouldn't know, but somebody would have to do it. It would have to be from y'all. So.
Yeah, and that's been the issue is a lot of the companies, whether we're talking about certification or curriculum resources, that they've been unwilling to submit their stuff for the Louisiana review. For the same reason other curriculum don't want to submit, if they come out as not tier 1, then, it's like a bad mark against their name. So, Kay, you have some information?
Well, what she shared with us this morning, both of us use a lot of materials because they are so a lot similar to and there are a lot of task bars, a lot of lessons already written out. That are needed. It's been very good, and it's all non-student people. So if you contacted the publisher, if you can give them the email address, happy to look at it. Our review tools, our rubrics, or evaluations, or whatever you call it, they're posted online, so publishers can see the criteria and the indicators they need to meet. Also, with lots of other posted reviews, so they can see sample reviews of those things. Some of the issues with you and with publishers is if they don't offer a full print, right? And we hear from a lot of them here that why don't you review supplementals? Why don't you do this? Our goal is to provide the best information for school systems, schools, and teachers, but the easiest lift on the teacher end. If I review a bunch of supplementals, no one's doing the hard work of putting that together in a comprehensive program for a teacher. We do that and we make sure we provide that information. That's not to say there are not some wonderful supplementals out there. But if we review a whole list of a la carte, it's still the burden on the teacher to put that together. So I should say our system is great. It's a wonderful and robust system, but it's for a specific thing. And it doesn't mean that's everything, right? And just because it breaks something as tier 1 doesn't mean that everything else is bad or everything else is good. But it does serve a particular purpose for a particular reason, for a particular. This curriculum has a Montessori publisher. Like if we took our Montessori manuals and albums and had it aligned with our Louisiana standards, so that means it doesn't have to come from a publisher. We have OER curriculum, which means it was an educational resources, and the departments publish them, but they are regulated, right? When you think about accessible education materials, the ability to be able to produce in large print and braille, which means reading NIMS files and things like that. So by and large, a lot of times it is coming from a publisher because they have the means of resources to meet those needs. So let's say you have teacher created materials or a group of teacher created materials and we send it to our review. That's great. We need to make sure their NIMS files will be available because if one of them is adopted, they would be water print and braille. So there's some of those stipulations you have to, we're doing that process, looking at my team, anything else. I'll look back and see if they're proud of me or not. Am I talking about the teacher edition part or the student material? The student material, I mean, the student material, but Montessori is not like the book. Materials that are sensorial, that papers will know. So I'm trying to think, would it be ELA, would it be math, would it be all?
ETC offers the entire sequence Montessori from age 2 to 0 to 2 all the way to 12.
So I've struggled to imagine an ELA curriculum that doesn't have tech. Yeah, so we need large print and braille. We have. But we'd love to set up a problem. We could talk about some of the things like we have many OER open education resource curriculum that's not a company, right? But it's good people getting together to make good work for good teachers. But we do need to make sure that some of those accessible features are available or able to be easily obtained for them.
Yeah, you would probably need to talk through all of the different colored shapes and what each of those means and how that is used as a progression to teach students traditional English language arts, not through a textbook, but more through a sensorial way. You know, all of that information would have to be provided to Miss Nikes and her team for them to make any informed decision.
With ELA, that's where different, yeah, it's the process. So it's not specific. In math, there's specific materials that everybody has in common. In ELA, it's the process. So it could be a novel for her, and it could be a debatable reader for me. But what exactly that reader is based on trial, interest, like where.
And our ELA will be a tool, when we think about, and I talked about foundational skills, when we talk about phonics pressure, that is really looking at our standards and the need for our knowledge building curriculum. So it would be about related texts that build background knowledge for students for vocabulary acquisition through the series of related texts on top of the theme.
So what if we use unimproved curriculum already, text for the purposes?
So this is, again, I'm sorry to digress here and there, but I have this conversation a lot of time with folks who are supplemental, and they're like, well, we align with the lecture plan, we align with this, and this is my comment, and then we have OER curriculum, both ELA and math, and science, and now social studies. You can take those materials and package it in the course for a process that makes more comprehensive, and then you have the PC that align to as well. I've yet to really get a publisher to take me up on that, so I'd be kind of excited about it, honestly. To me, it seems like a win-win. If you could really imagine teachers and students benefiting from using your materials, but then also having the full curriculum with it as well. It would be a way to make sure you have all those components, but then to that connection piece that I talked about, that we don't want as a burden our teachers at the end of the
Comment and a follow-up question. If anyone needs accommodated materials for BI students, that's what we have to do. I will be honest with you, a lot of Montessori materials, it takes a lot of work to make them BI accessible. When we're even talking about, hey, you need to differentiate between this red block and this blue block, that means you have to label all of those in Braille. So it takes a lot of effort. We worked with Louisiana accessible materials, and we worked with our Braille. It's a lot of work. If anyone needs that though, please let me know. We can help because we've gone through a lot of that and have a lot of those files. And I had a follow-up question about super app and for labeled schools. I know we have the option to select an alternate research-based option. Honestly, I wonder if that was last years ago though. We're the ones, but when you do that though, if you select an alternate research-based option and that isn't tier 1, are you eligible for the competitive funding?
It depends on the cycle, what's eligible for competitive funding. So for example, this year, no funding was offered for ELA or math curriculum, even for labeled schools. So, I'll be honest, if the student comes to me, I can decide whether to approve and fund or not approve the whole super app. So there's instances where I approve and say, hey, I don't want to hold up the super app because it's research-based option, but I'm also not going to fund it. Or like, no, they're selecting, not this example, obviously, but they're selecting a curriculum that doesn't align with the science of reading. I'm not, that you may have evidence, but I'm not going to support that. That's why it's like, it doesn't, it's not an example here, but I'm trying to think of it. That's where I'm glad that you repeated it. Yeah.
All right, great, rich discussion. Any other comments on the subject on the update of curriculum resources? I'll just make one follow-up comment that I know of at least 3 different parishes that have been able to use funding from the state to purchase Montessori curriculum and or resources. So I presented the appropriate way. I don't think funding has to be a barrier to implementing true Montessori, but it may take, the knowledge basis in this room to help each other do that. So again, going back to some of the goals that you discussed last time related to funding for various aspects of this, I think there's a knowledge base within this room and on this committee that can help people navigate the appropriate funding sources for that. So thank you, Ms. Nikes.
And funding is a part of this is part of the motion update as well, but we're gonna hop really quick to an update for legislation, really quick. To provide that update so that we can get to the other meetings. So
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you guys. I'm Ben Lamont, I'm Director of Governmental Affairs for DOE, and I also represent Bessie on policy decisions at the legislature. And if you've been paying attention, we've obviously had a very busy launch and past weeks. And it's been a pretty aggressive yesterday. We had 17 bills just for education, and also Senate. But I gotta tell you, it's going really well. And it's going well for this purpose too, in terms of Montessori. So yesterday, House Bill 45, Mike Johnson's bill was the proposal about providing certification from any Montessori training course from a program accredited by the Montessori Accreditation Council for teacher education. And full disclosure, I just want to say this, obviously, I'm sort of new to this role about a month in, so please don't despair. We have experts with me at the table to testify and answer any questions that the legislators may have. There are many, and I know little. So we have people like Dr. Jobrion and our other stable, brilliant people that he bench to become augmenting those capacities. But so essentially yesterday, and for the people streaming online to get an idea if you weren't able to read it, the first has to do simply with certification. A Class C teacher shall have a certification from either the American Montessori Society, the Association Montessori International, the St. Nicholas Training Course of London, the International Montessori Council, the Southwest Montessori Training Center, or the Montessori World Educational Institute, those are both in there, or any other Montessori training course from a program accredited by the Montessori Accreditation Council for teacher evaluated education, or jointly approved by the state board by Bessie and the Louisiana Montessori Association. I have never seen the word Montessori. Next, the Class B, this is essentially the same thing, entailing everything from Class C, but it includes 3 years Montessori teaching experience. And then the Class A teacher shall meet certification qualifications of paragraph 2 of the subsections getting into the legislative jargon. But those same accreditation groups, plus at least 1 year of teaching experience in a Montessori school and have a baccalaureate degree. You know, the good news is this was approved unanimously yesterday, 13-0. Next, it will go to the Senate and to the floor. And obviously, I'm not going to try to predict the future, but I can tell you just gauging the tempo and sort of the temperature and Ken's committee meetings. This legislature is moving swiftly. They're considering everything, but honestly, it's a pleasure to see such swift action. And I hope this is beneficial for you all today. Any questions?
The committee task force, we'll open it up to any questions to be.
Okay, and look, you guys can email me if you have any time, please. Thank you so much.
Not a question, but a comment. Joelle got that done. I mean, Joelle met with Representative Johnson and prepared everything. He went and testified all that yesterday. So
Thank you, Joel.
we're very hopeful. It'll make it easier for at least on the teachers. Right.
And so Molly, as I understand it, the addition of anything that's MACD approved opens the door for us, and it doesn't require then the letter from LMA and then Bessie approval. If this legislation passes, anything that is MACD accredited, like the Center for Guided Montessori Studies, those who participate in that training would then be able to add that to their certificate.
We didn't remove anything. If somebody has received training from St. Nicholas, for instance, which is no longer, you can't go and receive training from St. Nicholas. As you submit applications for needed teacher certification in 5 years, you don't want someone to be in a position that, oh, no, now it's not right. So we left that in, and then we also wanted to leave in or any other, training program that's jointly approved by LMA, that's because there may be a training program that sprouts up within the state of Louisiana that's not really interested in obtaining the MAC credential that allows them to be recognized worldwide, but maybe it's a training program within Louisiana. That's only going to train Louisiana teacher that wants to pursue that LMA and Bessie approval. There's still an avenue for that without seeing, we didn't want to remove everything and say it must be MAC.
Yes, ma'am.
Hopefully passes written and speaking from them with Jonathan, he's very helpful that it will, just breeze on through the Senate like it did the House and sign into law that.
And we'll have some other discussion about certification later on.
So those, Mr. Powell, were the two specific LDOE reports that we wanted to provide. There's one more, okay.
And we don't have anybody from Burnell's team here to present it, so I'll just kind of go through what I know. And basically, it's what I think we've kind of discussed already, is that there are funding options for Montessori initiatives, but they do flow through the regular MSP formula through your local public school and whatever, allocations or whatever you get with that, whatever your associated public school district is. And so you would need to have those local conversations with them to determine the need, the level of funding support, the priority, all of those things. Other than that, it would be outside sources like grants, those kinds of things that you could certainly look for opportunities for that. And when we have our conversation later on about the association and some of the conversations we're going to have in the next motion, maybe that's something that a group gets together as a resource and shares information about, there's this grant out here, those kind of things, if there's anything that anybody's aware of. But that's what we found out when we talked to Burnell and his team. Everything flows through the local school district. If you are private, and of course, at your, MFP for the publics, and you just have to make sure to be an advocate for your process with your superintendent. So we have two here that actually could speak to more information on funding. They'd like to take this opportunity to do that.
I'll defer to you, Mr. Powell.
I was looking to see where she was pointing. Well, I think it's consistent with what we said earlier. There are mechanisms within the super app to be able, particularly if you're starting a new program as a research-based program, which we've done multiple times. But also the funding pieces that are in your Title II for professional development, for ongoing training for teachers, as well as Title I, those dollars are able to be used for those purposes. So at least on the traditional public and or charter side. So I mean, I've not seen a situation on our side where funding was so big of a barrier that we couldn't find access to it through the various mechanisms that the state has at play.
It's fine, I'm going to have just 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds.
Yes, is that a question?
Yes, it's a question. 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds don't come out of the MSP.
So what we have seen done in different places in the state is the grading of funds through programs like Head Start, as well as LA4 and 8G, in addition to have the mixed age group classes that are consistent with
3-year age thing.
the 3-year age band with Montessori programming. It's being done, in some locations. So some leaders may be a little reluctant to braid funds because it does get complicated. And, once you start mixing those funds, now you have to abide by the restrictions for each one of those different funding sources that can become cumbersome, but it is possible, it is allowable. You just got to be ready for all that comes with it in order for that to happen.
So, Ms. Powell, those are the three sort of updates that, based on the last meeting, we wanted to present. So that would conclude this item.
So with that, Rachel, you want to?
Yep, so the next item is item 5, the consideration of Montessori education next steps.
We have a motion to move to the next item. Dr. Franklin, second. Okay. All right, so the motion to consider Montessori education next steps has passed, so it's on the floor, discussion to be held here, and I think this will be a continuation of kind of where we left off, where y'all left off the last meeting. We unified around a purpose, we unified around some very specific goals. And as Ben just talked about some legislation, there are a lot of other conversations taking place right now related to access to various educational programs, whether it's within the public sector or the private. There's conversations being had around accountability. There's conversations being held around funding. So we'll open the floor for conversations around the next steps. I also want to bring attention to I believe Ms. Williams provided a lot of, I think, did you provide? So articles around the success of Montessori education as well as the research behind it. I think the majority of the folks in this room understand and appreciate and respect the research behind Montessori education. But I think what we're going to have to do to put some meaning behind this particular task force is really identify what we think are our next steps to kind of keep the ball rolling. And this may be, Christy, where we go back to some of those conversations from earlier around the legislation, around certification, around these kind of big buckets we were speaking to earlier.
We also wanted to provide information that kind of help foster some of these discussions. I know that a lot of your questions and comments last time were about assessment and accountability. And so that team worked to provide this information here on the slide that basically, at this time, there couldn't be any changes to assessment and accountability because, in Louisiana, all public schools are included in that, and federal law doesn't allow for a different accountability system for any kind of Montessori school, public schools. And then the private schools that do participate in the scholarship program also review, they receive a score based on the same factors as public schools. So the law requires that those schools do receive that is based on the same factors as the public schools. And so right now there can't be a change. The assessments are written to assess the standards of Louisiana. So if they're following the standards of Louisiana, then the accountability system and the assessments that are associated with that would have to remain the same. So there won't be any changes in that system. They did have, on the slide, oh yeah, at the very bottom, it's just if you have any questions about it, you can email accountability@la.gov about those specific questions. So we just kind of wanted to provide the information that we had, and then facilitate any other discussion. If there's any other questions that you have about that we need to take back to that team, or any other discussion that they need to be aware of. We also have some information about certification, and we're going to go back to the law and just kind of open the discussion about those things as well. Anybody have anything for this piece?
I do. So if we do continue to take complete at the end of each grade level, I wonder if the school score, the SPF rating would be affected if it would only be at the end of the cycle. Right. The three-year right? Maybe there's something in there that we can put for Montessori schools that in research it's showing that it's the first few years, but by the third year it exceeds students.
Regular, but we can definitely ask that question to that team. Rachel, do you add to that?
Yeah, part of the issue, so if a student doesn't take the exam for a reason, in essence, they would receive a 0. So obviously that would be a huge.
I'm all about taking it because I think we should have showed that. She does what is the thing I'm saying in the scoring part of looking at the school, grading the school. It's shown that the schools the first few years, but by the third year, the students who take the standardized assessment exceed.
So you're saying the school score should be based on children that are in the third grade, 6th grade?
Yeah, in
end of the 3-year cycle. I mean, I'm not saying that just as far as like,
They still take it, you just,
they would still take it, but like for Montessori school, can the score, the grade, whatever the FPS score, the grade, all that, be at the 3rd year.
We can ask. I don't know if that has anything to do with the federal regulation. It was supposed to come, but I think she had some other, conflicts today, so, we can definitely take those questions back.
I would rather push, I think to the point of federal law doesn't allow for different accountability systems, and I think since LEAP and SBS, that's already established. I would rather push on what's going to happen in the future for K-2 accountability. And if there is room at this point, since that is not yet fully established, if maybe there could be a consideration there, whether, and I'll speak on behalf of not only Montessori, but also at the language immersion school site, that maybe there is consideration in making that policy so it's a little more inclusive to different models, maybe to have more of a focus on growth, to your point, a multi-year measure rather than a year-over-year measure, because that is research-based for language immersion and for Montessori school sites, that has a disparate impact or effect. And as that's going to go in a few years in accountability, maybe we could consider those things up front before the policy is in place.
Any other discussion around the assessment and accountability piece? I do have one question, if there's no more discussion, Christie, on their separate bullet there. Any more discussion? So I just want to make sure there's a clear understanding of where it says private schools who participate in the state scholarship program also receive a score that is based on the same factors as public schools. There are still some criteria associated with that, right? Like they have to have so many students before that is the case.
as far as the lawyer, and
Yeah.
it's 10 or something.
Yeah, they have to have a cohort of 10 within a scoring group, okay? Because every private school is not getting an SBS like public school. Okay. Did you have anything else, Christie?
Not for assessment accountability, we do have around certification.
Okay.
And these were just, recommendations to kind of facilitate the discussion about the desires, the needs, the wants that you have. And then, of course, now we have the piece of legislation that was submitted, and so some of these may or may not still be needed, so we can make a discussion around certification. And what the next steps might be for that.
Y'all mind if I start this conversation with some questions? So I heard the update from Ben, and I've got, I guess, two main questions. One, Joelle, what's being presented right now is still primarily related to just private schools? Okay, is there a reason we're differentiating private schools? Maybe this is an LDOE question. Why we're differentiating private from public when it comes to the Montessori training and or certification?
Well, I don't think we should differentiate, but there was a law or the other books that we
Right,
were having problems with teachers who were members of LMA.
Yeah.
Getting training through, they would go and get training through a program that was not accredited. Figuring, that is what is recognized
Right.
internationally. This is the gold standard. And then, just because I had a school and the teacher who taking the training hadn't read the non-public bulletin that specifically listed the training program, which are very restrictive. Because of the 7 listed, 3 or no more, that got accepted students for training. So it's very difficult to obtain training. So, Dr. Joe Brown was at a meeting where Ms. Meg and I came, and we had to appeal for 2 of her teachers that had received back the accredited training and could not receive a teaching certificate. And you stood up and said, hey, NACD's wonderful, and we appreciated that, but we didn't want to have to appeal every single time. So I wrote a letter to Betsy and said, hey, what can we do about this? And they said, you have to law change because this law is on the books, and the law specifically says non-public schools. So I went to Representative Johnson and I said, hey, this is a problem, how can we help it? And so we've been working on that since last summer, and he introduced it to the education committee yesterday. It would be great if it said, McAfee for all. It just needs to start naming specific training programs, and some of those training programs float away and don't exist anymore. And the other thing is these training programs that are on the list, like Southwestern Montessori Training Center is on the list. It is now more. But once you get approval with LMA and the Department of Education, there's no tool in place for going back and assessing these training programs again and seeing if they're still qualifying. Once they receive that mark of approval from LMA, Department of Education, that was forever. If they're MACD accredited, they have to reapply every 5 years to show that they continue to meet the standards. So as a head of school, if I'm looking for a training program, I'm gonna look for a MACD accredited program to make sure that my, teachers that would like to receive Montessori certification are getting quality training. So I think it's better to include MACD, which is very concerned for those teachers that already have training through another program that's not MACD certified, like Montessori World Educational Institute. We didn't want them to lose their teacher certification when they reapply every 5 years. Now, if there's a way to go and make the law, for public and non-public, wonderful. My goal as the president of the Montessori Association is to get this non-public law fixed.
And to just be clear, our certification policy, the non-public Montessori certification is an ancillary certificate.
Right.
And, we do have the endorsement for public school teachers and the requirements match. And so we would likely have our policy mirror whatever we're gonna have to update if the law passes. For the non-public, we would likely mirror that for the add-on as well. And one other caveat too is MACD is a national accrediting body, and so there's the potential, if they have a degree and meet all the other requirements, depending on where they obtain their certification, if it was done out of state, that they possibly could come through the out-of-state route with MACD as that accrediting body. When we went from regionally accredited universities or entities years ago to nationally accredited, MACD is on that list, so there's a possibility. It's going to depend on each individual case and what they did. But it's a possibility that way as well for a standard teaching certificate.
Yes, so Christy shared that with us, and we sent one of our teachers through, and she got the level 1, I guess, regular teaching certificate out of state. And we've got 2 more in the pipeline, but we're having to reach out to those states to get information.
Right.
But we're experimenting now to see.
The tricky part is going to be the assessments and whether, because we have to prescribe assessments in alignment with their initial preparation area. And from what I know, and I will admit, I'm very limited in my knowledge of Montessori, but it seems like it's a methodology of teaching. And so that would be the pedagogy part. So I don't know if the pedagogy on our currently adopted PLT or pedagogy exams would align with some of those Montessori procedures or processes, and if they would be able to pass those tests or not.
We're gonna send some people to take the test and see what happens.
And then, Ms. Baloo, if you wouldn't mind, I know that recently, I believe it was Ms. Lana who actually processed a leadership certification with Montessori.
Can we stay on the first one for just?
Yeah,
a couple
sure,
more
sure.
seconds? So, and this is the follow-up question to my first question, and I still have my second question. Well, because when you change the law, you might as well go ahead and do it, everything you can do. So while I understand the thinking where y'all were, Joelle, I mean, would y'all be comfortable with us approaching Mike and or whomever else, Representative Johnson, with doing an amendment to include public with that? I mean, that was some of the conversation we had around the table a few years ago about, because the second question is going to be about LMA, if we're going to move towards this being a public and private, combined consortium, I don't understand the reasoning behind keeping separate law related to certification specifically. And maybe there is some, I don't know.
An existing one, yeah.
Just adding in that.
So we can still amend to take out the only private part to this, correct?
It doesn't say only private, I don't think in those statutes, I could be wrong. These statutes were written before they were public Montessori schools.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So. The public Montessori schools, the private Montessori schools held on to these. When public Montessori schools started, there's nothing in Bulletin 741 about Montessori, I don't think. In non-public 741, we have policy based on the statutes. I think the statutes are just pasted into the policy, but there's nothing in 741 defining Montessori or requiring anything about Montessori in public. This statute is non-public ancillary. your teaching certificates, are now MACT. They've got a database, MACT is accredited, so if anybody comes in with a MACT credential from public schools, that's what she said, they can get an out-of-state certificate. So I don't know if there's any purpose to add to a non-public ancillary, anything about public schools.
Well, I think Ms. Baloo was alluding to that fact that, so in 746, there are two sections. There's one for non-public Montessori, and there's one that's more specific to public Montessori. Yeah, in Bulletin 746 certification. But Ms. Townsend, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna put you on the spot from the policy perspective. I mean, as the legislation is written, and to Ms. Baloo's point, we would be able to likely change the public certification pieces based on that legislation.
Right, I think that's the only fix to prescribe the certification requirements for teachers. And since, as you said, it's been a really long time since this is adjusted policy, time for refresher.
So the policy, as long as it doesn't contradict the law, can still be modified to align more with the practices that we have on. So back to the comment about the out of state potentially qualifying for an ancillary certificate. As I understand it, Dr. Franklin, you can help me with this a little bit. To be certified in a public school that happens to be doing Montessori, you still have to get certified to be a public school teacher, and then we can add on Montessori, but not have a standalone Montessori certification.
Well,
It'd be nice if we could, because, for instance, with all my experience in Montessori schools and a master's degree and Montessori certification, that it is MACD accredited. If I would ask Dr. Franklin if I could have a job, I would have to go into one of the alternate
Yeah.
certification programs. And that's kind of frustrating, but
Yeah,
there are.
ask every one of her teachers.
Yeah.
I've got 41 who brought you, and it's time consuming, if you're looking at an 18-month alternative program from the state and an 18-month MACD certification in Montessori. And so where they could have gone through and done a master's program or further, we're still trying to get certified to stay in the classroom.
So I think you can change the policy, the certification to traditional Montessori accredited by MACD teaching certificate as an alt cert. Or as because they're right now, you can hire somebody, they couldn't be a practitioner teacher for the year in their Montessori training because it's not preparation provider authorized by the state, but if we have.
but they could apply to be an.
If we had a Montessori
Well, so
preparation provider, go through the portal with the Board of Regents or whoever they go through it to be approved. Then if your teachers were enrolled in a Montessori training program that's approved by the state, they would be practitioner teachers doing one certification, Montessori only, in your school at the same time.
I think the dilemma we ran into years ago, unless things have changed with that, is the MACD approved providers aren't necessarily interested in submitting
The
their
one that-
stuff to the state, because they're more than likely not going to meet the same criteria that Northwestern State University does for teacher preparation.
But we have private providers all the time.
Yeah, not
For
necessarily.
alt cert especially,
If they
Right.
may now.
if they have a degree already.
Now.
So the conversation I had with ETC yesterday, they also run Gold Coast Montessori Training Center, and some of the people have used them. She said they would consider possibly doing something like that, but what we need to do is either have our own training center, go through the portal, or find somebody to go through the portal.
So, Christie, just out of my own ignorance, like, why would, if MACD is a nationally recognized training program,
It's not a,
that,
it's not a training. It's an accredited.
It's an accredited body.
Of teacher preparation.
So the
okay,
Center
an
for-
accredited
right.
body.
The Center for
That's
Guided
even better.
Montessori Studies is MACD accredited.
Right. So if they've been accredited by MACD and they get that training, why would the state not just accept that if it is?
We would if they're out of state and if they meet all of our other out of state like requirements for teacher preparation. Year-long residency, you know, or student teaching internship in lieu of that, those kind of things.
So explain to me why that's only acceptable for out of state, what if they're in state?
They would have to be an approved provider.
We don't have an
Here in
in-state,
Louisiana.
we don't have an in-state Montessori teacher preparation program, that's MAC tier.
But we do have out-of-state entities that apply to be a Bessie approved
But.
provider in our state, so they could do that.
Right, and but that means, so if you did an in-state MACD approved program, you could not apply for the out-of-state
Right.
credential.
And there's no other pathway to
Right.
straight ancillary certification or standalone. So I
I
get,
mean, I don't know that that's entirely true.
Right,
If
it
you're not
depends on the
accredited-
program.
No, if you're
Right.
not
So,
accredited, then you would.
From a certification standpoint, in-state is essentially our Bessie approved programs. So if you completed a Bessie approved program, then that's an in-state program. If somebody completed a program that's not Bessie approved, that would lead to standard professional certification. Where it's gonna get tricky is the law says that would lead to standard professional teacher certification in
Another state.
the program state.
Right. Mhm.
So that's where it gets a little tricky. So it may not be okay, but if they attend, an online program or something that they can do virtually that's based in Georgia. Georgia accepts MACD for standard professional teacher certification. Then that's an out-of-state program that would potentially meet the requirements. So even though they're doing their student teaching and doing everything else here in Louisiana,
Right.
If they're
The
eligible to
program
apply in
provider,
another state.
Yeah.
it has to,
With our
it
provider
gets tricky because it has to be
state. So I
a
guess-
program state where the program
Right.
provider
It
is
needs to- I guess
based.
we need
But
clarification on what you
Program
mean
is
by
based
somebody
here in
completing
the
the
MACD
MACD program.
that's where it's likely to get tricky under current law. And that's in law, or the program state part of it.
Mhm.
Because we have a MACD accredited training center here in New Orleans that our school runs.
Okay,
So our teachers would not have gone through that, have received an AMS credential, MACD approved training center. But because it's in Louisiana, they could not go through that out of state.
And a lot of it's gonna be also though, not necessarily where the facility that they completed, like, where's the program based out
In
of?
New Orleans.
If it's, and it's not, and like
it's not.
that's
associated
just
with
a
something
branch
else.
of, I know I've
It's
seen
something, it's something y'all created
So one of
Got
the
it.
ideas was for y'all to submit.
to
your
submit for
application
program
through the portal,
approval.
Which is what we had talked about in that.
They're cycled twice a year.
y'all hold the answer.
Yes.
All the Montessori problem.
I just want to remind everyone, so it is live streaming, so we do have to speak one at a time because the conversational gets very hard to pick up for anyone who's watching.
But to
Yes,
go to
sir.
your in-state question, if you're talking about that program, I would say that our recommendation would be to do the program approval process. Their cycles twice per year. I believe it's the Believe and Prepare inbox that they would need to send an email to Believe and Prepare at la.gov. There is a notice of intent process that's starting in the next month or so for approval at the October Bessie meeting. If you're interested.
So I think several things that we talked about today are bigger than what's going to get solved in this meeting today. I'm very excited that Joelle and them have worked on getting some of these laws addressed that will help us get more training opportunities actually approved. But the big things that you guys talked about last time, being able to make recommendations for policy updates that are specific to Montessori programming in our state. Making recommendations related to funding, considerations for funding specific to Montessori. Making sure that we do whatever we need to do to combine public and private under LMA or whatever it would be after, we get everybody involved in that. As well as the curriculum accountability and professional development opportunities. I think my understanding is this task force was kind of set for like a very specific time period with not necessarily a lot of potential ongoing discussions, but I would recommend that if, I guess, whatever approval we would need to get to maybe keep this task force ongoing and maybe create some subcommittees off of this task force to work on each one of the goals that you identified last time. And then when we can make the meetings once a quarter or once every 2 months or something like that, and each time come back with specific next steps related to those particular goals. So I chicken scratched a note to the co-chair while we were talking there, but I guess I'll ask officially, is that, I mean, is your understanding of what the purpose of this task force is from the department's perspective and or potential work moving forward? Again, understanding that I do understand that the scope of the work was originally maybe a little bit more narrow than this, but I think we can do some great work if the department would be okay with us doing it.
Yeah, so the motion was made, and it was made very generally speaking from the Bessie standpoint to give the task force sort of flexibility on what was discussed during the meetings.
There was no time to put up this.
There wasn't a time limit. There was not a time limit on the task force. You know, we officially planned for the first and the second meetings. You know, I mean, as co-chairman of the committee, I'm not opposed to having additional meetings as long as the meetings are purposeful. And you know, everybody is extremely busy. So as long as the meetings can remain very purposeful and specific in what it wants to accomplish, then I think that we could continue to do some work.
So to piggyback on that, one of the conversations was, you know, to drive here for, I live in Baton Rouge, so I'm not speaking for myself, but to drive here for a 2-hour meeting and then drive all the way back, if we could turn this into some sort of like afternoon work session. I don't know what the rules are about us meeting and forums and all that kind of stuff, but if people came in for the day and then we had afternoon work sessions or went somewhere and did more planning or research or something to make it everyone's time more. Yeah.
So Ms. Townsend, we'll defer to you on the specifics on that.
But I think when we first talked about having this group, it was really for them to be able to come together and solve for specific issues. And I know some of them we got were very short-term fixes, like adding in the approvers. Some of them, like the new pathway, was gonna be a bigger project to work on. So I think, but there's not, you know, an end date or anything like that. So we don't want to make it a standing group that meets every quarter or whatever. And I think at that point, we get to where we weren't, maybe we get a good use of everyone's time. But I think when you have, you know, things you want to work on, let's schedule these couple more meetings out and see where we are with this project. I think that makes a lot of sense. As far as having some time to kind of split off and work, the way we typically would handle that is if it's on the agenda as work time, you could come in like before a meeting or say after a meeting, just in here. And that way it's still noticed to the public that the group would be working. If someone wanted to come in and observe the work of the group or offer comments or whatever, they could. And I think it's just that transparency and noticing part that we want to be really cognizant of, but we can still provide that time and space for that event. That would be helpful.
So if we were to just say that there's the work of the task force, but then the task force is going to divide up into like these official/unofficial subcommittees that outside of the meeting are going to be work, like Dr. Franklin and I live in Refuge Parish. So she and I may work together on potential policy things, specifically those that impact public Montessori. That could only happen under the
Those kind of things get really tricky, and we've been dealing with it with a few other groups too, just trying to make sure that whenever you have members of the group working on official work of the group, that all of that is accessible to the public. So if you had, like, let's say you split off and, you know, you took a certain topic and you went back to colleagues that you had that aren't in this group, but they're just people that you know and work with a lot, and y'all work together to bring back a product or an idea or something like that.
just a report.
Right, for sure. And then, but where it gets tricky is when you've got members of the group meeting outside on official work.
What about the work groups that don't have quorum? They're going to other groups before?
So that's when they're noticed here. Yeah, I think it's all about just that notice and accessibility to the public whenever it's a formal groups. And we keep the task forces are more informal in some respects, but it's still, you know, right now, y'all are like a formal recognized group. At whatever point you stop, right, that you,
When you were doing work, that is your work that you were doing, not as this task force, but as your work, you are not representing this task force or necessarily doing work that you were directed to do by the task force. Like Ashley was saying, those lines can sometimes get blurred. I can't tell you that you can't go talk to somebody from this group because you would have naturally done that within your scope of work to begin with. So it's just making those distinctions. What is it that you were doing as part of your own professional work? And what is it that you were doing as you were being directed as a part of this task force? Does that make sense? Is that? Yeah.
So, Ms. Townsend, if the legislation passes, we know we have to update both public and non-public policy. Could we then say, as part of this task force, and the task force would have to appoint a certain group that would assist us in creating said policy? Is that?
yeah, I think the policy from this legislation will be very straightforward. I mean, that's something that our office we drafted.
Okay. So we would bring it to the task force like we do with other SEEP or SAC, where we bring something and ask them to endorse it or provide feedback.
And I think one thing there is when that next meeting would be, if we'll put all of the policy and response to legislation on a timeline that comes to that meeting. And so if y'all have a meeting before then, we can bring y'all this draft. That would be really nice because it looks good whenever we can say this group reviewed and endorsed it too. Same time, if we want to get it in place quickly and move it through the rulemaking process, and y'all don't have a meeting scheduled before then, we wanted to get your input on it still and see that you're all good with the draft. We could also just have after we all send it out to you guys and y'all could send him any, like send him individually, any, you know, I have an issue with this part or what about this language right here. Feedback on it instead of like formally reading it through. We could do it that way too, just to facilitate the process and not hold it up anymore. There's a couple options. But now for the bigger policy, when you're looking at how do we want to restructure this method of certification and this initial thing, that I think would be really good for you all to work on together. And one thing that's helpful for us too is not even drafting the language, although you all can do that, but making recommendations for almost like a good goal for a project. Like we need this thing to accomplish this and that, and then our team internally can work on a draft for you all to bring it back and y'all can say, yes, we like how this works, can we tweak this right here a little bit, instead of having to spend time in your workshopping language.
So it sounds to me like, and feel free to correct me if y'all hear something different, that the majority of the work of what's even around the goals, we need to do it as part of the specific public meeting. So, I mean, I would like to see us come back together and maybe this like you did the groups last month. And each time we come together, at least for the next meeting or next two meetings, if we want to just kind of stick to planning that far out, when we come, it'll be, maybe to Molly's point, we'll have some working time. We'll go ahead and assign some subcommittees within the group. But then when we get here for, 30 minutes to 45 minutes, we'll have a group working on policy. We'll have a group working on funding. We'll have a group working on the organizational stuff, the PD opportunities.
The goals for those things you're talking
Yes,
about?
ma'am.
So how official does that have to be? If Mr. Powell as co-chair wants to say, I would like Ms. Washington, Dr. Franklin, and Ms. Flaherty to work together on blank, does that have to be something that's brought here and approved and?
Yeah, I'd say kind of want to work on which state, and then on your next agenda, we'll put it at the, top of the agenda, at the official meeting will start at 11 o'clock, but we're trying to begin at 9 o'clock, and so that way it's noticed, but people, if they want to come early and watch our work on, I think they could. But then it'll be noticed that the official meeting will start at whatever time, and so then it'll be good, because when you get here, you'll know what's going on, you'll maybe pull some resources together, maybe if there's, like y'all were to decide this time on, point that you would want some policy language around, we could have drafted that ready for y'all, like we could have the department staff, whatever would make sense, just whatever would help facilitate that work. That would let you pull that together between now and then, because you would know it's coming to that. And then we came in, you could work on that, and you could, correct whatever you need to be able to consider as a group and have that ready with action.
We appreciate your very specific guidance around this.
Are there rules about food and lunch and things like that? Okay, rules about eating food, lunch, breaks, that kind of thing. I think I have somebody who'd like to provide lunch if we have a longer working meeting, but, I don't know if the rules are. So.
I don't see anything.
Yeah, I mean, there's no funding tied to this task force, so we don't have the ability to do that.
But if you work 9 to 11, maybe eat and then work our meeting. For the people who drive in,
There's also a cafeteria that has
Yeah.
pretty good food here in this building. So, I mean, even if you recess for lunch and it's on your own, you brought something or you went to the cafeteria, that's something that can happen as well.
Okay, so as part of the motion that we're still with determining some next steps, I've identified the 5 things that everybody in here talked about last time as far as goals. So there's policy, I'm including the law there because policy and law are going to go together. Policy, law, funding, PD, the organization itself, and curriculum and accountability. If you are comfortable with doing it, we can go ahead and, whatever you're most interested in, you want to participate in that group, you say it out here. We'll try to make sure we have at least a couple people within each category, and those that aren't here, we'll assign them wherever we want them. Because that's the way committee work happens. Okay, so what I have from the notes from last time are 1 on policy and law, making recommendations on policy and law. 1 on making recommendations related to funding. 1 on recommendations for professional development opportunities, which may be getting handled through the MACD conversations. 1 on combining the public and private under an association. I mean, there's an association that already exists, so, but that's what y'all said last time. And then 1 on curriculum and accountability. Those are the 5. And Kay has already said she wants to be on the curriculum and accountability. Okay, and remember your name? Kelly Washington. And I will do policy and law.
I want to do that.
I would too.
Okay.
I can make a suggestion.
Yes, ma'am.
If there are multiple people, they could be on multiple of these working groups, and you might not necessarily do all 5 of these at a time.
Focus on a couple.
Yeah, focus on 1 or 2 at a time, that way you can have more input from your members and you wouldn't have.
So can we do this? Can we send, as co-chairs of the task force, can we send an email to the membership and say, please select 2 of the 5 that you would like to work on? We configure who will be on them, and as part of the next scheduled meeting, we would make that public who's on which.
Have them prioritize, list of, please rank these, because somebody in here may be an expert in
All of them.
My only concern there would be, then what are we preparing for the next meeting if we don't identify?
These reports, but I mean, we would have to send the email, set that up.
In the next week or so.
And right, and
Okay.
then at the next meeting, what we could do is, as part of the meeting, we could set out a time frame, as Ms. Townsend suggested, for work.
Mhm.
And then after that work group session, then the group or groups come and present what they've worked on or come up with as part of the next steps.
So if we do it that way, would we need to, at the next meeting, adjourn or come together for 5 minutes and say, we propose these groups. Everybody motion, everybody's approved, then have the work time and then come back in or?
Can we just make the group right now? Sounds like there's two groups that we've already kind of surfaced, right?
There's definitely policy, law, curriculum and accountability. I think the association needs to be a working group too, that needs to happen sooner rather than later, just because I think once the voices are for sure unified, it would make sense, but I'm comfortable with that if everybody else is. I mean, we just,
Focus on those three.
yeah, policy, law, the association, curriculum, accountability, and then and I guess we need a little bit more clarity on the come together, have a working group, and then come back together. Is the working group gonna, it's like all the camera and the sound and everything, because like we're all in here working, like I sing a lot when I work, so I don't necessarily know that everybody wants to hear.
Has not started the live stream until the whole meeting starts. So like whenever that notice come on the agenda for the meeting start, that would be the live stream. But then the working group can be on the agenda of the live stream.
Okay, so
You can say.
so potentially our next meeting could say, to your point, the working group go from 10 to 12. We stop and eat lunch and then either in the cafe or whoever provides me. And then the meeting starts goes from 1 to 3 or whatever. But the live stream is only from 1 to 3. But we would have this room or whatever room for them. Okay, so does that sound good to everybody? All right. So then we go back to, I've got 3 people on the policy law. I've got a couple people on curriculum accountability, nobody on the association stuff. So for those who have not spoken up on a particular area, would you like your name beside anything specific?
Policy and law.
Association of law.
Okay, Joelle.
Yeah, I would like policy and law as
So
well.
I think everybody's in one of the two groups for now, and the association thing might have to wait till the final.
Yes, ma'am. Does everybody agree with that? Okay. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's it.
And there's only 2 on the curriculum accountability versus 4 on the policy and law. At my count, if I factor it.
Yeah, that's what I've got.
So in essence, we wouldn't be talking about PD,
or LMA, yeah.
right?
So Joelle, are you comfortable going to the curriculum and accountability for now?
I think she'd be better at policy.
I'm sorry, policy. Well, now we're up to 5.
I can switch out. Well, go to.
Okay.
She's further down further that.
Since I'm not associated with a public school in curriculum and accountability.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, I got Kay, Kelly, and Angie on curriculum and accountability. I got Powell, Williams, Adrienne,
Got it.
said, what's your last?
Policy.
Colopy, and Joelle on policy law.
Yeah,
Ms. Day,
policy.
policy.
And is Becky coming back, do you know?
So she is actually retired. So we would probably have to reach out to her organization, like the organization she represents, which is her school district, to determine if they would want her to continue or would want to have someone else serve.
Look at the membership and the appointing authority and so forth. There's a lot of paperwork stuff that I have to cross-reference and make sure that I'm giving you the correct answer there.
And then maybe for now, Dr. Wright could be on curriculum and accountability.
That's where I put her. I just penciled her in. I put Heidi Goday on curriculum and accountability. I don't know what Dr. Corbett's background is.
Is he coming back?
Likely, it's hard for both of us,
Yeah.
honestly, to make it.
So it'd probably be policy.
You can put it there.
Policy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next, then.
Do I have everybody now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, Becky, we're saying,
We're not sure, certain.
should be. Okay, so just for the record, I have for policy and law, Jeff Powell, Molly Williams, Adrienne Colopy, Joelle Flattery, Miss Angie Day, and Dr. Corbett. I have Ms. Catherine
Gusa.
Saragusa, Ms. Kelly Washington, Dr. Angie Franklin, Ms. Heidi Goday, and Dr. Wright on curriculum and accountability. And I think that's everybody that's currently on our list, not counting Ms. Lowe. All right, and so the plan then is that we'll schedule another meeting. What was the original context? Every two months or every?
That's what we were originally planning for. I have a date in May. I know May is hard. But I have a room scheduled. If it works, it works. If not, we're far enough ahead where I can see if we can find another room. May 16th, it's a Thursday.
It's graduations and
It's closing out school. I know May is hard, but we were kind of anticipating every 2 months.
then we'll have to also check with Miss Landry, and I mean, she oversees a multitude of task
I did
force
check that
work.
already before I put that there, but we can double check, and make sure that there's no others that have been scheduled.
Yeah. So are we saying May 16th for now, or?
That's what we would propose.
Montessori Task Force meeting, May 16th. And we are saying start the working group at 10. So 10 to 12 working session. And then 1 to 3, basically the meeting.
Do we need an hour lunch, or can we do a 30 minute? I don't know. For people who are traveling, and does it matter? Do y'all want to spend an hour? Take care of things? Okay, one of those.
I know the last time we were here.
It took a long time to get to that.
It took us 30 minutes just to line.
Yeah.
Depending on what else, the schedule in the building,
Right.
try to go to the cafeteria.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and if you're gonna be gone the whole day, you may want that time to take phone calls, do other things in between.
So schedule stands. 10 to noon, working group, noon to 1. Do it.
How many people have?
13 total.
And then Rachel, Lana work on all of the minutes and all of these things, and, you know.
So it's be at least 15 people in the room.
Yeah.
Probably someone from policy as well.
Are you running committee? Which one are you saying about?
And if it's about lunch, I normally eat for 2. Yes.
So without any.
Yeah. All right, so if
next
there's,
item.
if there's no other business to be taken care of, I think we all know kind of what our next steps are. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
You can just
Unless
ask
Rachel has
her.
to say.
Well,
With the next
so the next motion, so that includes the agenda, so it's 11:36 a.m.
So can I get a motion to adjourn? Dr. Franklin, second, Ms. Day. Meeting adjourned. Okay.